I want to get a little personal with you, and I want to share something with you that I think Jeremy just alluded to and talked about. But it's this journey that we're all on. And I have this obsession with this idea of growth. Not that I feel like there's this place that I'm trying to get to, but there is this process that we're all experiencing and we're going through, and it's this idea of growth. And I don't know of a better way to articulate it than one of my favorite authors, Wallace Wattles, and he said that we're all predisposed to grow along certain lines, meaning we have like this genetic orientation or just way we've been built and the things we've been hardwired with. And that is deep within us. It's rooted in us, instincts and just who we are. And when we align with that and we seek to grow in accordance with that path or that predisposition, growth is easier. It's more authentic, it's more organic. And that sounds beautiful. So go all the way back to when you were a kid and just remember just how excitable you were, how passionate you were. I wanted to be an F1, not an F1, well, that would have been cool, but a fighter pilot. And I couldn't see very well. I have ADD, and I'm from Canada, so there was no way I had a shot. I don't know if they even have a fighter jet in Canada, but it wasn't going to be in my cards. And so fast forward, and society is not built to support us in our journey to be authentic. Who sees that? Who feels that pull away from what we've been kind of designed or called to do? Who's personally experienced that or is maybe battling that right now? I know that's been a significant part of my journey. And so here we find ourselves, and then we go through like education, these standardized approaches to things, and we run into these roadblocks. Like, for example, I'm not the most academic person. And so I struggle to feel like this. I just felt like a cattle being part of a cattle prod through a gate, and that was not my flavor. That's not how I learned, and so I struggled. And I felt stupid, to be honest with you. And so there was this constant pull and push to figure out, path of least resistance, fit me in, graduate from school, get a job, 2.5 kids, live happily ever after, retire, and everything's hunky-dory. And then life happens, right? And it doesn't work out that way. And that's what I experienced. So to give you a little deeper context of what I'm talking about, because I think we can all relate to this in one way or another. My early years involved trauma, abuse, and that was later amplified in junior high school. Who loved junior high school? With just this brutal, we just hate each other, we don't know who we are, and we just want to fight what we don't understand. And things like show up at school and you're going to be in the hospital tomorrow, and things where you just already felt like, man, I don't know if I'm worth anything. That stuff can be devastating. And I was not polarized, but I lived on these two spectrums. I had this insane, unexplainable ambition and drive and hunger, and then I was just deeply vexed at the same time. And it was really this the vision and the hope in the future and divine intervention that I'm even here today. But I felt this developmental potential that I had been given. Like, I had potential. I love that word. And the more that I thought about and anchored to that potential, the more I realized that there was hope there. But the beautiful thing about this is, Dabrowski said it best, there's this idea of we actually grow and progress as we break down, as we are destructed. So positive disintegration is the term, meaning the way that we grow is we need to break first. If you go to anyone lifting here, if you go to the gym, you tear muscles before they rebuild bigger and stronger. So this idea that we don't just happily progress, we actually have to face massive adversity. So the interesting thing, though, we have to break down to become who we are. And what I learned is Aristotle said it's easier to copy a genius than to create mediocrity. So what I discovered in my path and my journey is that I couldn't find a mentor. Any coach or any therapist that I met with would say something like, dude, slow down, just chill, and you'll be okay. And then I would meet with a coach, and they're like, I don't know why you're holding yourself back. What's your problem? Why not push harder? Go for it. And I just felt this conflict, and I couldn't find a coach that could get into my world and really see me and give me path. So as I raised my kids or in my relationship with my wife, I just noticed conflict, and I felt this desire to be this and to go down this path, but I had so many roadblocks and things in my way that were stopping me, and I didn't really know how to make sense of it. And so my life became a laboratory. My life became this path for me to say, I've got to figure this out. I need to go down these paths, and I need to understand how to be successful, because for someone that doesn't have a lot of self-worth or confidence, we do this. We say, okay, what does success look like? Well, success looks like you need to be a millionaire to be successful. And if I want to be spiritual, I need to have prestigious status or callings in a church. And if I want to be successful, I need to be an executive, a C-level executive. So I set up all of these benchmarks that were my barometers of success. And then I went out there and I started hitting those barometers, those benchmarks. And they were like nothing. They didn't mean what I hoped they would mean. I noticed things like with my family, watching my son born, and it like melted my heart. And I was like, that feels different. But that wasn't, like, of course I wanted to have a family, but as a father, successful father is really happy kids that thrive and they don't struggle, or we're just this partridge family, or whatever that would be, what is the one? The Romneys, right? Like, you just have this beautiful, like, Christmas card. And I don't know if we ever had a good Christmas card, honey? No, right? So I just felt like all of these benchmarks and all of these things that I'm measuring myself against are leaving me wanting and are not making me feel like I am anything. And then I learned this, that the only way out is in. And I realized that I've got to finally confront things that I've been running away from for so long and not be afraid of that. And in fact, I can't even truly be authentic. And so there was stages of this. Like, for example, I would be coaching somebody and I'd be saying, you know what, you need a career shift. You've got to go all in on that. And they came to me seeking for guidance on how can I better systematize my business so that I can not feel like I'm always on call. 2 sessions into our coaching engagement, he said to me, we talked about it together. He said, it's time to quit. This isn't me. This isn't my jam. I don't feel aligned with what I'm doing. And he left that business and became the CEO of a completely different company in a completely different industry. And today he has a podcast, and he's a thought leader, and he's so deeply aligned with what he does and who he is that he is experiencing true joy and alignment in his life. And that is what we're talking about, and getting into that harmony and noticing that conflict, which is good, but noticing when I feel like this is not me, this is not who I was. But I was being hypocritical, at least I felt hypocritical, that I needed to do it myself. And I knew that there were pieces and steps that I hadn't taken, and they terrified me. And they terrified me because I didn't believe that I had the capacity to actually pull it off, that people would even care, or that I had something unique to share. And part of that was because I wasn't willing to share it. I felt the moment somebody knew what I've experienced in my life, then they would just dismiss me. In fact, I was afraid to ask a coach, when did I do that? I was afraid to ask a coach or a mentor for help because I didn't want him to realize that I needed help. That sounded a little bit crazy. So who's been there? Who feels that? Like, who's experienced that hesitation, that reluctance to fully step into who you are because it just feels like I don't want them to know that? But there's something beautiful about that truth, about feeling free to be honest. And that's what I've discovered. But not because I found that mentor that could show me that path, but because I started devouring books and I started looking for guides and people along the way. And it was the mentorship and being invited to step into things that terrified me that allowed me to find my path. And so today, Growth Mastery is very similar to the book I wrote. And the purpose of that was to create and show a framework or a roadmap that can allow you to find your authentic path, your influence, who you are, and then the tools to actually take action with it. And so today, we coach individuals and we coach businesses on And the way that we do it is we literally break it down like a car in a shop. And we get all of the pieces everywhere. And we say, what is this? And what's the blueprint? What is this? What should this be? What would be the highest potential, the highest version, real estate term, highest and best use of all of these parts? Find me the blueprint. What are you supposed to do? What is your story? Think about that for just a minute. What is your story? If you go back in time, I've shared a little bit of mine. What's yours? What's brought you to St. George, to this moment today? What are the things? Talk about your family, maybe your lineage, your extended family. What is the story that has molded you and shaped you? What conflict and what adversity have you run into? And where are you going? What do you want your story to be? What do you want to be said about you in that time? And that's what we look for. We break that all down, and then we say, this is the most efficient path. And we put those pieces back together for the most authentic and aligned and productive path to growth. And what's so beautiful is this is true of any business, and it's true of any individual. The process is the same. And it's this positive disintegration. And so that's what brings us to today. And the continuing versions of what this will be are going to be several of the mentors and the guides that I've met in my life that have been instrumental in helping me find my path. The things that have allowed me to create a successful consulting business, the things that have allowed me to stand on stage and be comfortable here, the things that give me joy every day I wake up and I know that I'm in my element and I'm progressing towards where I want to be. That's the stuff. And so before I introduce Alex, I want to tell you how I met Alex. If we go back in time to about 2006, I was in the summer sales industry, and I got recruited to go and work for a clothing company. And I crushed the interview. If anyone ever wants to know how to nail an interview, call me, and I can give you a path, like a strategy that I've never not got the job when I made it to the interview. The problem is I was rarely qualified for the jobs I got. So in this case, I was brought in by a recruiter. And I went into this interview with a PowerPoint of like, okay, here's what you need and here's what we should do. And they were like, nobody did this, so you're obviously the guy. And in fact, we're going to give you both the VP of Sales and the VP of Operations. Alex is probably laughing at me already because he knows how much that would have been a mismatch. And I'm like, I got this. And then I remember they hired this other girl that was going to be the operations director. And she had this book, and I can't remember what it was called. This was a long time ago. It was like How to Fire Your Boss or something like that. It was like, she was like gunning for my job the moment she walked in, and she did it. She dismantled me. And I was one of two guys. We had an IT guy and me, and we were the only two guys in this huge organization of predominantly women, and they were killing it. They were amazing, but I was out of my element, assuming I had no confidence even at that point. And so on the 6-month mark to the day, I got fired. And they said it's just not working out. It's a complete blindside. And I went home, and I remember sitting in my car. I was devastated, and I was like, this just destroyed my career. And the reason it did is because there were some very influential VCs that were looking at this company, and I was like, this is my shot to make my mark in the corporate world and be someone that they would want to place into another startup. Like, it was my path. And it was over. And that was the first day I discovered the myers-briggs personality system. And so I took that, and I think I initially tested as an INFP, and then I later was an ENFP in my mind. But when I read that profile, and I literally printed a whole book of versions of this, I was like, of course I got fired. Like, this is it. I was so out of my element. I was not cut out for any of that. I'm like the strategic guy, the creation guy, and then I need to delegate. And I was like, I felt so validated. I'm like, okay, let's rebuild. Let's go back. Let's finish my degree at BYU. And then I went into real estate. And then I rode the real estate market into the toilet, which is another day and another story. But I was at least happier. But I still felt like there was things that I missed. And I had these truths in my mind that defined me, but I took the test. And so what did I know? Fast forward to almost 10 years later, and about 4 years ago, I was at an event up in Salt Lake City, and I met, at the end of it, my friend Scott walks me into this group of people, and they're all standing around this guy. And he's just talking to them. He's kind of focused on somebody. And then he looks over at me, and he starts talking to me about me. And I was like, what is happening here? And he was spot on. And he just started talking about the way I was thinking about even what he was saying, and he was just pinning me to the wall, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And it really was uncomfortable a little bit, but really exciting. And so I immediately said, we need to talk later. And so that night, I engaged him for another hour, and we had a consulting session. The next day, we met again, and we had a coaching session. And I was pushing back on some things. I said, no, you know what? I'm not what he said I was. I'm horrible at finishing projects. Like, I'm really good at go look at my garage. I have all of these half-built and half-finished projects, and he taught me an interesting principle, which I'll let him teach you. But what he discovered was that, and what he showed me was that I didn't even know who I was. I had so many masks and so many facades and so many things that I wanted to be or thought I was, and I was off. And I needed somebody to be able to show me that. What blew my mind is that he didn't even need a test to do it. He could look at me and decode me and see right through it. And so since that time, Alex has remained just a mentor. I don't know how often I send you pictures of people, and I'm always like, okay, help me out with this one. Because when you get to know people, because the truth is this, like, I never engage in a coaching session without typing the person first. And I never, any person I meet, I need to type them. I need to know, and I got to figure it out, because, like, knowing thyself is the beginning of all wisdom. If you don't know who you are, how can you effectively position yourself in a business? If you don't understand the importance of temperament and personality, how can you properly align your team and get everybody in the right seats? Have you ever had an employee that just said, I just don't feel like this is a fit for me. I just don't really feel aligned in this job? Or have you ever looked at your kids and you're like, you're so much like me, but I don't know why? Like, I can't make sense of your thought pattern there. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to know the blueprint and be able to know it truthfully, like authentically at the core, and not at some level, because our experience changes it. It reframes our view of the world. And so being able to peel all that back and start at the base is transformational, truly. And that's why I felt, as we kick off this Growth Mastery series, what better place to start than internally? Like, what class did anybody take? Maybe you did. That was like, let's discover who you are and how to unlock and unleash your potential. Did anyone take that class in high school or college? Isn't it disgusting how much time we spend learning and we don't ever really understand the most important thing, which is who we are? How can we honestly expect to be productive and to be aligned so that we don't find ourselves when we're 80, whatever, or even 40 and saying, man, I need to do a complete pivot in my life right now. I'm out of alignment. That is what most of us do. Most of the world isn't happy. Most of the world is out of alignment with who they are and what they should be doing, and that needs to change. Most of our kids are graduating from school without the confidence to weather the storms ahead of them, without awareness of what they can do to align themselves. And I fundamentally believe, among many other of the mentors and stories that I've met along the way, that the best place to start is right inside here. And it's, first of all, being willing to look inside and say, I can forgive myself, I can forgive people, I can forgive life or God or whatever it is that you feel has stifled or thwarted your path, and say, that might have been the best gift I was ever given. What if that trauma gave me that empathetic lens through which I saw people differently? And it gave me the passion and the drive to say, I've got to figure this out because I don't want to live like this. And what if that gift gave me the passion, the desire to say, I got to change this. I got to do something about this. And what if all of the things that followed that, down that path, although it felt like, man, I wish I could go back in time and make so many fewer mistakes, what if I needed every single one of those so that I could sit down with a client and say, I get it. I've been there. This is the path through. And that is perhaps the greatest thing I can say today is I don't know if I've ever actually said much of this out loud before, but I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't change it. Because what I experience when I sit down with an individual, with an executive, with a business owner, with an aspiring student or son or daughter is, I get it. I've been there. I understand what that feels like. And here's the path. Being able to just see someone 20 years ago, my age, and say, I'm so excited for you because this is the path. This is the mentor I didn't have. And that's what's beautiful. And so I'm honored and excited to share some of those. And we'll start today with my good friend Alex. So Alex, why don't you come on down here? Let's give Alex a round of applause because he's amazing. Truth be told, let's see how your mic does. Are you on? Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. So truth be told, I don't know how excited Alex was to come down. He's in the process of working on some big projects, and I feel like this was a bit of a shift of gears for him. And anyways, we're good friends, and I just absolutely felt I'm honored that you came down here. And so with that, I want to just do we want to sit down or we want to just talk? Okay, so you take the middle one, I'll take the other one. Tell us, where did this all start for you?
Well, they say that necessity is the mother of invention, and it was the same for me. So when I was in college, I stumbled across a mystery, and my friends didn't know about this mystery, my family didn't know about it, only a few people were talking about it online, but I recognized that it was causing a lot of problems. It was causing problems for individuals, for businesses, and for relationships. And I discovered that this mystery is that even though personality tests are supposed to tell us who we are, they're usually wrong. And so I decided to make it my mission to figure out why. Why are they wrong? And they're wrong at a high degree. So I started studying as many books as I possibly could. I consumed books about personality, temperament, and I started to make connections and realize that most people are taking them wrong. And one of the reasons why is because most people are highly contextual, which means they will think about how they are with their friends, how they are with their family, how they are at work. And then they kind of jumble those all together, and they confuse their nature with their second nature. So your nature is what you're born with. It's your genetics. Your second nature is your habits. It's the things you've picked up. And when you conflate the two, you don't know who you are. So it does make us who we are, our nature and our second nature. However, when it comes to understanding yourself and what you should do with your life, which college major you should choose, the mate you should choose, and the career that you should choose, you have to take into account your nature, not necessarily your second nature. The reason why is because people who are making 6, 7, and 8 figures come to me and they say, I'm making all this money and I'm miserable. And I say, okay, why? Because I don't love what I do. I'm making a lot of money, but I'm not fulfilled. And so I say I can help. So before I learned all this, I had to come up with the system, and I discovered that there were patterns that I was seeing. So I was going around with this book of quizzes, like personality quizzes, and I would ask everyone I knew, are you more this way or that way? And it was surprising me because I would ask some friends, and they would say, yeah, I'm very conscientious. And in my brain, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Their office, their room, their backpack, everything's messy. Why do they think they're highly conscientious? So I saw the need, and my brain wanted to fill the void that was created. So I saw the problem, and I started to study it. And then after many years of study, I came to the conclusion that you can actually know people's personalities from their appearance, their facial structure, their eyes, their body type, and the way that they move. Now you could say, how is that possible? That doesn't seem possible. That seems strange. This is like some voodoo magic. But everybody does it. And so just to help you to see that you do it as well. So this is a question that I like to ask people. And it's not offensive, but it's just a question about if this room was completely full and we had one person that had Down syndrome, do you think that you could recognize them? How? Their appearance, okay? What are the specifics? They have an eye shape. Okay, so you don't know exactly what the eye shape is, but you're like, I know they have an eye shape. They have almond-shaped eyes that are slanted inward. Okay, what else? Nose. They're what? Their nose. Nose is a little different, yeah. And so they have a flat nasal bridge. They also have an occiput, which is the back of their head that's shorter. They have a protruding tongue. Instead of having two lines right here, they have one that goes across. So if you look at somebody and you say, I know that person has Down syndrome, and you could actually know that they have trisomy 21, which means they have an extra chromosome on their 21st pair of chromosomes. So everybody's looking at their hand, and they're like, do I have that? And if you have just one line, it doesn't mean anything. You have to have all the characteristics. No one needs to worry, and they're wonderful, so it's okay. So my point is that it's like having X-ray vision, and I figured out how to have my own kind of X-ray vision. So I thought to myself, if people with Down syndrome have a certain look, what else is out there that has a certain look that I could figure out? And lo and behold, I figured out that you can recognize, like you can recognize identical twins, that there's people that have certain types.
I love it. So remind me, I think it's interesting, like the journey to go through that, because I think you probably had to go way back. I mean, I think 600 books, is that the right?
Well, 600 books in 5 years while I was consuming knowledge, but I've since read many more. But
so talk about like the significance and why is this so important, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so why it's important to me is that I was kept from the truth. I was stumbling in the dark, and I didn't know which college major to choose. I switched majors. Who else here has switched majors multiple times? Yeah. And I also didn't know who to choose as a mate. And then when I got out of college, I didn't know which career I should choose. So I was stumbling quite a bit. And so I recognized that the greatest enemy inside of me was my underdeveloped self. And I decided that I would be like Luke Skywalker, and I would go to the Dagobah planet, and we would do some swamp parkour, and Yoda would be on my back while I do some flips. And then I would go into the Dagobah cave. And if you remember Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Luke goes into this cave, and he sees himself fighting what he thinks is Darth Vader. Or he goes, and starts to fight Darth Vader. And then the head, gets severed, and then he looks at who it is, and who is it? It's himself. So the Dagobah cave is facing yourself. So I decided I had to face myself. Really take a good look at myself. Who am I? And so I took all these personality tests, and then I recognized that I knew myself and that I wanted to help others to have that experience. So I then wanted others to have the truth that I had found. And it's interesting because when I first started saying that I could do these things, it caused some stir. Some people thought it was really weird. And I did kind of go about it in a weird way in the beginning when I was on buses and on airplanes. I was like, let me tell you about yourself. And they're like, have you been stalking me? And I'm like, no. And so it's a very atypical way of going about talking to people. I've become more savvy in being able to introduce who I am and what I do, but there is this high correlation between what is called the genotype and the phenotype. The genotype is the genes, the phenotype is the physical representation of the genes. The genotype is like an equation, and your body is like a graph. And so if you know math, everybody's like, oh great, we are talking about math. But you can solve for the equation by looking at the graph, or you can solve the graph by looking at the equation. And so one of the crazy things that I was telling Brad about the other day is that if you Google, AI can predict your personality by a selfie. You can Google it right now. We're on the cutting edge with AI to be able to do it. The cool thing is that AI only has a 58% accuracy rate, so I'm better than AI right now. But soon they're going to overtake me.
So what would you say, just kind of talking about the way you went about it, what would you say are maybe the biggest adversity you faced as you were going through this journey?
The biggest adversity I found for myself was a mental block. So when I first introduced my abilities to my parents, they thought that it was strange. And I had a mental block because I thought that I could go to my parents and be like, here, this is what I can do, and they'd be all excited and cheer me on. And lo and behold, I got resistance. And it was really hard because it affected my ability to speak. So I ended up going to a voice coach that does more than voice coaching. They kind of get into your history. And so I talked to this woman, and she said, your jaw and your chest are tight. And I was like, oh, yeah, they kind of are. And she goes, it's like you're a crash test dummy bracing yourself for impact, like you're waiting for resistance. And so I was like, interesting. And she goes, who is it that you're trying to prove things to? And my dad popped in my head. And so my dad has created resistance because he hasn't believed me. So it affected my ability to put myself out there. Every time I gave presentations, it was like my dad was in the audience, and I was trying to prove to him that I knew what I was talking about. And so it took a while to overcome that. And it was really difficult to have that kind of resistance because I felt like my parents should believe me. It's like, I have this really cool thing, and they should believe me, but they didn't. And so overcoming that by doing breathing exercises. So like I was doing shallow breaths, so I wasn't, taking it in. It was like I was bracing myself for people to resist me and to say, you don't know what you're talking about. And so she also said, there's a phrase that comes to mind that every time you speak, it like pops in your head. And so she's like, what is it? And she said, or I said, I don't believe you. So it's my dad's voice in my head saying, I don't believe you. So that has been my mental block for years, but through the help of this coach and then other spiritual experiences, I was able to get that monkey off my back, get my chest, expanded, and my jaw isn't so tight. So if you hear my jaw getting a little bit tight, you'd be like, oh, it's your dad. Stop thinking about your dad.
I think that's interesting though, because as I've shared a little bit about mine, like there's that voice in your head, right? And just think about what yours is. And I work with a lot of people, and a big common one is coming back to like a coach or, some figure in your life that was constantly reminding you that you're not good enough or that you can't. And it's interesting just how much that dynamic affected my personality and my voice, and learning how to kind of shut that voice down. But the best way that I did that was really understanding the ways that it was showing up for me. And the problem with it is I would have never found that because the voice was me, it defined me. And so every test I would take or every approach I would take to understanding me was already filtered or painted by a perception that I had. And that's probably what was the most magnetic part of this, is that ability to to see it different. So what are some of the ways, and I kind of want to, this will be my last question for you, but like, what are some of the ways that you're seeing like, what are you doing with it now, and what are you noticing as you take this out to the world?
Yeah, so I decided that I wanted to put myself out there more. I'd gotten over this thought that I had this inability to speak properly because got that voice out of my head. So what I did is back when I first met you in 2020, I did some podcasts, like for the first time ever. Because before that, I was like, I'm going to say the wrong thing, or no one's going to believe me, or whatever. And then I did it, and so I did James Wedmore's Mind Your Business podcast, and it's number 387 if anyone ever wants to listen to it. But that was the first one that I ever did. And afterwards, I was so relieved because I was like, oh, I can do this. And so I decided I wanted to have more of an impact, and so I ended up starting a company. It's called Inner Shift. And so instead of just focusing on the personality aspects, I wanted every session to have an inner shift. And so I want, actually, is Lisa here? Are you up there? Lisa to come down. So is your husband here, Devin?
Yeah.
He left. If he wants to come down too. I want you to come down for a second. And we chatted earlier today. And I want people to kind of experience things through her experience so that we can get the ball rolling, so that you can feel comfortable. Because some people, they're a little worried that I'm going to read them, and they're like, you don't have anything to worry about. And so if you want to come down, Lisa, unless you want us to go up to you, we can go up to you. Oh, no worries. It'll just be you then. Okay, so.
I should have put deodorant on it.
That's okay. No problem.
Devin needs this, not me.
I'll send Devin down as soon as he gets down.
Yeah. Okay.
On his way.
Okay. So we had a fun session earlier. And what would you say the biggest takeaway was for you, or what you enjoyed the most of the session that we had?
I think the biggest surprise and shocker was just the fact that he asked me 0 questions about myself, and like he walked in and sat down and was like, okay, this is your type. And I was like, ooh, this is exciting, but then he nailed it and like kept nailing it, and then I just started sweating, and I'm like, I've never had this happen before, and it was just a really cool experience, especially with my husband, because it was like, you not just only talked about me, but also him and our dynamic together.
Yes.
Seamlessly. Like, I don't think we picked out one thing that you didn't nail. So it was super awesome, but also creepy, because
Yeah. So,
we've never met you before.
Yeah.
So it was cool.
yeah, so we've never met, never talked, and did I ask you anything?
No.
Did I talk to you? Did I?
I thought Brad and Josh were just being nice. Now I see we were set up.
I know, I just decided to do it because I want people to get a feel for it and to make it to feel comfortable if I do actually call you down or go up to you. So I probably will go up to you, and we'll have a mic, and I'll tell you some things about yourselves. But I wanted Devin to say how I did in regards to understanding the dynamic of your relationship, how you felt in regards to your personality, how it related to your wife's personality, if you're up for saying.
It was, can you guys hear okay?
You can use the mic just in case.
Really cool, because Lisa and I have been married for 13 years, and Alex did in 20 minutes what took us 10 years to learn about each other. And it's been a lot of struggles and a lot of good times and bad times and different jobs and school and kids and, our own journey to learn about each other and figure this out. And he just sat there and looked at us and said, oh, your type is this, you do this, and you speak this way, and he feels this way when you do this. And we're just like, this is incredible. He literally just explained us without even knowing this.
Awesome. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is like understanding yourself as an individual. And then we're going to talk about some business things and then relationship stuff. But for this one, I just wanted everybody to kind of get a feel for the fact that, like, I'm not making this up. You can be okay. It's comfortable. Were you comfortable? Did it make you feel comfortable?
Yeah, super fun.
Yeah, it was enjoyable, so there's nothing to worry about. Did I share any like deep dark secret that embarrassed you and made you feel humiliated?
No, it's nice. Like I
Okay.
feel like even you might be like scared that like you're gonna point out a flaw or something
Yeah.
like that, but it's not really like that. We all just have our different quirks, and I feel like you present it in a way where it's like, hey, when you do this, he feels this way.
Yeah.
It just kind of helps you have a better understanding.
Cool. So to kind of wrap up this little section of what we're going to be doing, their personalities are very different, you know, and that's usually how it is in relationships. And so one of the best things, of course, to have in a relationship is to have a really good character and really understand the other person. And so you don't want to see things as you are. You want to see it as they are. And what amazed me is that Lisa was able to pick up certain things that she learned from Devin, and Devin was able to pick up things from Lisa. And that's like the best thing. Like, it was like one of my favorite sessions to do of all time, because you were able to figure these things out on your own. And so I didn't really have to do anything. And it's not like I was like doing counseling or therapy with you. I was just helping you to see the dynamics of what is natural and what is unnatural. And so when you work with nature rather than against it, it helps you to live authentically. And when you live authentically, then you feel like you're yourself, and then you can get your needs met. So everybody give a round of applause for Lisa and Devin. Thank you for that. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about seeing personality differently, but we're going to talk first of all about what personality is, what people see as personality. So as a definition, it's just your characteristic way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Yet, if you look up on Google, it says there's no universal definition for personality. That's kind of a problem, right? So if there's no universal definition for personality, how can we all get on the same page and really know what it is? So there was some crazy statistics that I found. So there's this book, it's called Insight, and there's studies in it about people and their self-awareness. And so these people who studied the people who were trying to be either known as self-aware or not very self-aware, they even brought their parents and their friends into the study. So these people who were studied, they took a personality test, they had their family take a personality test, and then they had their friends take a personality test, and then they observed the people. And so if you were to guess, how many of them thought they were highly self-aware? 60%? 75%? 95%? 95%. Yeah. And it goes with those statistics where like 85% of people who are getting an MBA think they're better than average, right? And so most people, they overestimate their abilities. And so 95% thought that they were highly self-aware, but this study found that there were either 50%, 30%, or 10 to 15%. What would you guess? 10 to 15% actually were highly self-aware. So my mind was blown, and I thought, how can this be? And so with personality tests, it's $1 billion industry. And the reason why it was such a mystery to me is like, how could $1 billion industry be causing so many problems? So for individuals, you may choose the wrong major. For businesses, you may choose the wrong employees. You may have personality clashes. You may have a bad team and a dynamic because certain characteristics aren't there. And then a lot of companies spend a lot of money. Who in their company had their company or their team take a personality test? A lot of people, right? And you're like, this is going to help us. And now you're like, that probably didn't help us. And so it's not that I'm against personality tests. I absolutely love them. It's just, why is it that people are not able to take them correctly? And I kind of touched upon it earlier. It's because people are highly contextual. A lot of people are highly contextual. So they will think of their job. And if their job is like accounting, and yet they're not really an accountant type, but they like have that job, and they're working the job 40 hours a week, they're going to feel highly conscientious, right? Or if you have like a mate who requires the house to be really clean, and you're kind of more the type that creates clutter everywhere you go, but you've learned how to be more conscientious. You may think that that's part of you now, but the reality is that if I gave you like $100 million and you had no responsibilities and you couldn't really fail, you'd probably slip back into what's natural, because you have what I call default settings, or like factory settings. So you go back to the factory settings when you get rid of the habits, right? And so for those who are religious and you go on a 2-year mission, you get a little bit more extroverted and you think you can talk to anybody, and then as the years go by, you're like, I'm not knocking doors, I'm not talking to people, I don't care. You go back to a kind of normal state of equilibrium, right? Right? And so that's how people are, is they come into this world with an inborn personality, and then they have what is called a chosen personality. And that's what you decide to do with yourself. And what I found is that you have what are called all-stars and bench players. Your all-stars are your best players, and they're going to help you to be highly competitive in the world. However, you also have bench players. And these bench players you put in to kind of rest your all-stars. So everybody has two sides of the coin inside them. So for example, everybody has conscientiousness, but they also have spontaneousness, okay? And sometimes when you're just goofing off, you can put in your bench player if you're naturally conscientious, which means that you're conscious of what you're doing and you're more consistent. So that's the other thing too, is that if you ask somebody, are you highly conscientious? They probably have their own definition of what conscientiousness means. But when you look at conscientiousness, that's actually one of the number one factors to determine success in life. So if you're highly conscientious, you're often going to be very successful. You're going to be one who gets good grades, usually. You're going to be someone who can finish things and make sure that everything is running more smoothly. Now, there are people here that are highly conscientious, then there's people that are mid-grade, and then there's people that are not so conscientious. Okay, so I'm going to talk to somebody. It was somebody that I was sitting by over here, and hopefully he'll be okay with this, but I'm going to walk up. Let's see if I get the mic. I'm going to tell him some things about himself to help you to see what I'm talking about. Okay. Okay, here's your mic. Oops.
Thank you.
Turn it on if it's not on. Is it on? Okay. So I'm going to tell him about himself, and I don't need to be by him, because all I have to do is take one look. And you'd be like, one look? Yeah. Okay. So his type is a type that has to do something that's going to like change the world and revolutionize. He can't just do what other people want him to do. He has to do something that is very meaningful, and he can get really obsessed with the thing, so he has to learn all that he can. He's very interested in personal development and gorges on information. He likes to teach and impart knowledge, wants to help people to go from a low state to a high state, and so he has a very good ability to personalize. So he's able to read people in situations and be able to talk to them and give them a sort of packaged morsel of information that is fine-tuned for the person. Also, his type is one that has to be an original, doesn't want to be a copycat. He has all these original ideas. He's really into ideation, really wants to come up with something, work with it, and make it into something that he's very proud of. He doesn't want to be a copycat, doesn't want to follow what everybody else is doing, and he wants to be someone who can become like a master. He has to become a master at least one thing, because he does not want to be average Joe, doesn't want to be run-of-the-mill, doesn't want to be someone who's just shopping at IKEA. Not that that's bad. How am I doing?
Spot on. I'm thinking of all specific examples of the things that you're describing right now.
Okay, have we met before? Did I pay you to do this? And did we talk?
Nope.
I just looked at him because I was sitting up there, and it's just really easy. And you have something you were going to say?
What's that?
Did you say
No,
it?
I'm speechless because of what just happened.
Okay, so are you married or dating or not?
Neither, I guess.
Okay, he's also really picky too. But that could be guessed from, talking to him. But I'm just asking him because his type is very particular because he has to be understood really deeply. And he's very intuitive, and he doesn't like it when he's talking to someone and they can't go deep with him and they don't get him and understand him. And so whoever he chooses, they have to really understand him deeply because he's very in tune with a lot of things. His type is highly spiritual too. So he has some very spiritual gifts, so things will come to him really easily, and he wants to do everything that he can to be like the best person that he can be. So he's actually going to self-sacrifice more than most people. And he's going to care so much that he'll actually sometimes self-sacrifice himself out of himself. And so then he'll be too servile instead of becoming who he's supposed to be and stepping forward as the king of his own world. How did I do with that?
Spot on.
Weird, right? Yeah? Cool? Okay. So, if you have a question for me, ask it or I'll take the mic from you. Okay, cool.
I don't dare.
Okay. Cool, so that gives you a little taste. So if I were to be able to do that to everybody that I talk to, do you think that I could help them as an individual to self-actualize and be authentic? Do I know his authentic self? Weird that I know it, right? And so I have never seen him in my life. We've never talked. How did I do that? Anyone want to take a guess? Sorcery. You're that person that says sooth, right? And that's what's interesting is that's what my parents thought too. You can understand now why my dad was like, what's going on here, right? Okay. So as an individual, I gave you an example of me being able to just choose someone. And he's in the back, but I sat next to him. I didn't even hear a word he said because he didn't even talk beforehand, and I was just sitting there. And you'd be like, okay, so scratching your head, how did that happen? Okay, so how I did that is he has a certain facial structure. He has certain eyes that, have you ever heard that the eyes are the window to the soul? Yeah. And so I just have to look at someone in their eyes and I can know certain things about them. And you look at a person's facial structure and you'd be like, how can you know things from people's facial structure? Okay, so if you see somebody and they have a more baby face, what characteristics do you think that they have? Cry a lot. Could be. I like that. Very good. Move to the head of the class. Yeah, so there's cry a lot. I love that. So when you look at someone who has big eyes, round face, small chin, soft features, what do you think of?
Innocent.
Cuddly.
Yeah, innocent, cuddly. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So tell me your name. And I'll show you how it works. So tell me if you yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay? Okay. So Katie is really inhibited, so let's help her to feel uncomfortable. So don't look at her. She gets embarrassed really easily, and so she has what is called an amygdala that fires. That means she's going to have a fear center in her brain that fires. But reason why I had her as a demonstration is that if you were to look at her face, does she have features that are more soft and more, is she baby-faced or does she have more mature and hard features? Soft. Okay. So, okay, so if I look at her, I'm going to know that when she talks to people, she's going to wrap everything in bubble wrap. And she doesn't want you to ever be offended by anything that she says. Okay? And she's going to be very sensitive, and so she's actually going to get creative with what could go wrong or what people say to her, because she's creating over-meaning, which means she's always looking for the meaning of things. And if she gets overwhelmed with certain feelings, it's because she feels things so deeply. And so when, for example, she compliments people, it's like she's feeling it and goes, oh, I love what you're wearing. And so she's looking at things, and she has the gift of composition, which means she's going to be able to arrange things in such a way and sees beauty in how things can work. And so she's got this artisanal side, but she's highly sensitive. So if I speak to her, am I going to say, what are you doing? What's going on? How come you're doing it like that? No. I'm going to be more in a roundabout way. So if somebody has features that are more nonlinear, you often have to speak to them in a more nonlinear way. So she would not appreciate it if I said, are you coming to the party? It's at 7 p.m. What are you going to bring? Because that's taking away their freedom. And you're like, really? I didn't know that. I'm just asking someone to a party. So she would rather have me say, oh, a bunch of us are getting together in between 6:30 and 7, no later than 7 if you'd like to come. Doesn't that sound nice? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Now, the thing is that she may have a job where she's actually having to be more responsible, take care of things. One of the reasons why I know is that she has tightness in her back and her neck. Okay? She's not supposed to. Do you get massages?
I married a massage therapist.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So, like, your type is very nurturing and caring and soft and sweet and loves, like, animals and babies and little things and, cuteness. Okay? Make sense? Yeah. Did I say all that stuff about the other guy? I didn't even actually get your name. What's your name?
Jim.
Jim, I didn't even just know his name. That's the best part. I know all these things, but I don't even know his name. Okay. And so I didn't say any of the same things, right? So am I just picking people that have those traits? No. Doesn't that sound like a completely different person? And so if I look at her, what is her face shape? More oval, okay? And then if you were to think about like her body, is it more soft or hard? And I'm not saying it in a bad way. I'm just like softness, like, soft, right? And so when you see people and they're completely ripped, are you going to think they're going to be like a teddy bear? Usually not, right? Okay. Especially if they're on steroids, right? Got roid rage. Okay. So what that is if I were to talk to you, and I don't know if you noticed, like, I'm taking an oblique approach. I'm not making very much eye contact with you. Why am I doing that? She doesn't feel uncomfortable, okay? And so I'm just asking things in a roundabout way instead of being like, do you want to do this right now? Do you see that? And I'm making it so she actually is doing it. Now, she's holding it away from her mouth because she doesn't necessarily want to be heard, because partly she hasn't found fully her voice and will let it out because she's a little bit embarrassed to do that. But as you find your inner voice and you see what your authentic self is, you'll be able to completely shine. But there's something in your head that makes you think that you have to be much more structured and rigid and do the adulting thing. How long ago did you start doing that?
A while.
A while. Okay.
Practice.
Okay. And so to be you and be the authentic version of yourself, you have to first accept yourself, and then you can change. You don't have to wear a mask saying that you have to be so conscientious and to be so rigid and care so much about time. Now you'd be like, what do you mean she doesn't have to care about time? Well, you don't have to be overly caring about time. Do you have a good relationship or a bad relationship with time?
Can I answer that later?
Okay. All right, well, I'm only asking you that because I'm trying to flesh it out for you, because I can tell that you probably don't necessarily have the best relationship with time, because you may feel like you never have enough time, or that you always have to rush to these things, and so it causes you to go into fight or flight or freeze. And so that's one of the reasons why your back and your neck is tight. And you're going to possibly have hypercortisolism if you continue to go into fight or flight or freeze, thinking about time, deadlines, and making sure that you're doing what other people want, because you have a tendency to people please. right?
Yep.
Okay, how'd I do? So I went out on a limb and asked you because I knew you were highly inhibited, and hopefully you're not going to hold that against me. Right? Okay. All right, so that's the thing as an individual. Now as a business, who's starting to think of like their business and what this could be used for in their business? If you want to raise your hand. What can you see? Only a couple people? Everybody's not having their minds going? Is it because your minds are blown? Hopefully they're blown. And some people are like, he probably paid that person, and this is all rigged. Do we know each other?
No.
Did I pay you?
No.
Have I ever talked to you? Okay. Do you know anyone that knows me? Probably not. Other than, him. I don't know him. Yeah, so there you go. So just helping you to see that none of this is rigged. It's not something that we created. I do it on the spot. Okay, so as a business, one of the problems in business is you don't have the right people in the right spots. Okay, so a lot of people come to me and they'll say, I'm looking for someone to be an integrator. And it's like a project manager who takes care of the things that you don't want to have to do. Because there's certain people that just love to be like the visionary, and then you've got like the integrator that like is the hustler that does all the things, okay? Who's in need of like an integrator? You are. Okay, anyone else? Few people. Okay, so one of the things that you look for in an integrator is they usually have to be highly conscientious. You usually want them to be agreeable. You want them to be actually an ambivert, which is in between an introvert and an extrovert. You can have an introvert, but a lot of times you have to pull things out of them. And extroverts, if they're really extroverted, they're going to want to talk too much. So you want somebody who's in between. Then you're going to want someone who's a little bit more agreeable, but not so agreeable that they agree with everything that you have to say. So then they take care of the stuff. So do you currently have an integrator? You don't. Okay. So I'm going to help you to kind of understand how to recognize a person that would be a good integrator for you. Okay. So let's see. You said you want an integrator too. What was your name?
Rod.
Rod. Okay. Do you have a current integrator or like a project manager?
No, I'm back to a one-man show. I thought, am I a visionary, an integrator? I don't know what I am. So that's why I was...
Of what you are? You're a visionary. You want an integrator. Yeah, you could really do well with an integrator because you can do stuff. So you're one of those people that's like able to do it all. And like whatever you do, you'll be really good at. And you figure it out, and then you're like, yeah, I can do this. But the problem is that when you do that, you become the one-man band, and then you don't get to do all the high-value work. So you're meant to do high-value work. And that is the stuff that will be like making you $1,000 an hour, or $10,000 an hour, or $1 million, ultimately. Yeah, everybody's like, yeah! And you're like, do I have to be the person who does the low-value work? Maybe. So it's not that there's certain types that only do the high value and then certain types do the low value. But people who are highly inhibited, highly sensitive, highly neurotic, they almost end up like shooting themselves in the foot all the time because they're scared. So they go, I want to take the safe job that pays me peanuts and I can pay my bills and I'm excited, instead of being like, I can risk a little bit. So the people that are risk averse and that don't like uncertainty, they usually take the jobs that are low value work. So your type is the entrepreneurial type. You have it. And you're the type that, if you haven't already, goes really, really far and figures it out. Because you have this ability to just figure things out. You understand how people and things work. And then it's just like, no, you just do this. And it just makes sense, right? And so you'll figure it out, and all you need to have is the answers. So like your type is always looking for the patterns of things. Yeah, and he's smiling. So yeah, got him to smile. Awesome, it worked, okay? So he needs to know the patterns. And if you can't know the patterns, you can't proceed forward. And he's kind of like a hamster in a hamster wheel. And he gets frustrated, and he talks about it, and he's like trying to talk to people and trying to figure it out, who do I go to, who do I go to? And if he gets the answers and the results, then he's just like, eureka, hallelujah, you know? And so you're studying and reading and going to different things to try to get those answers, right? And so you have to find people that are similar to yourself who have gone further along. So you find the people that you admire, and then you mirror and model some of the things that they've done. And you've probably already done that, but the specifics have a lot to do with what is the law of the harvest, okay? You have that built into your brain. That's one of the reasons why you're successful. You've probably done sales before. You could kill it as a salesman. And you also have that charm. So look out, ladies. If you're already married, then fine. But yeah, he has that charm. So he's able to talk to anybody and make them feel pretty special, like they're the only person in the room. Uh-oh. Don't hit the player, hit the game, right? Okay. So he just needs to get, of course, to the right people, and sometimes you have to pay a little bit of money to get to those people because there's the gatekeepers that hold their special stuff, and you just have to get past that. But what kind of business do you have, or are you starting a business?
I have a business, a supplement company.
Oh, awesome. You have, okay. Cool. Yeah, and so how you said that it's just you right now? You kind of let go of your employees?
It's had ups and downs. It's had great years and then not so good years, and this pattern thing just makes me laugh. So I'm always just
Okay.
yeah.
So if you ever want to talk and want to get an integrator, I could help you. So I gave you some of the things, and I was going to tell everybody to kind of how you'd look for it. So if you were to think of somebody who was on top of things, what do you think their facial structure is going to be like? Wrinkles? I like it. I thought someone's going to say scars. Yeah, they've been to battle. They got battle scars. They've been battle tested, you know. Wrinkles, that could be it, you know. But that just probably means they have kids. But yeah. So think of like the facial structure of someone who is often going to be on top of things. Would it be more rectangular, square, or more oval and round? Okay, so that's the first thing that you're going to look for. And I'm not saying that you should never choose someone with a more round face, but most of the time they have pseudo-conscientiousness. They force themselves to do that. And they don't want to be that person that's the workhorse working and caring so much about that stuff. They'd rather figure it out as they go along. And if they force themselves, then it causes them to have issues, okay? So then the other thing is that if you want someone who's agreeable, what would you look for in their eyes? What are agreeable? Yeah, those softer, so you have emotional connection. So if you meet somebody and they talk like this, hello, how are you? I would love to work for you. Are they going to be agreeable? Probably not, right? And you're like, does anyone talk like that? And then you start listening to yourself, do I talk like that? Wait, I do talk like that. This is my voice? This is my voice? Yeah. No, and so you're looking at somebody, and there's some people that you just don't connect with them emotionally. And so you'd maybe want someone who disconnects that way to be your doctor or your surgeon. So do you really want a like highly sensitive person to cut into you? Probably not. I'm so sorry that I'm cutting into you. You know what I mean? And so people who are agreeable, they're going to be more friendly. They're going to want to work with you. Disagreeable people are like, I don't want to do that. I don't care. I feel like doing this. You know what I mean? So that's why you're looking for someone who's agreeable. And then you want someone who you can tell is going to be often more conscientious. And so I'm not saying anything against people who are often on crash diets and then they go up and down. But usually people who are like that, they want to let things play out rather than be highly conscientious. So you could choose that type, and they've learned how to do it, but a lot of times they don't want to do it like that, okay? Also, how could you tell if a person is more of an introvert or an extrovert? Does anyone know? Eye contact is a good one. I like that. Anything else? Oh, someone that is studied. What's that?
Inflection in their voice when they talk.
Oh, that's good. I like this. Okay. So in the studies that I did, I found that there is such a thing as a real smile versus a fake smile. Okay? Who's ever heard of the Duchenne smile. Has anyone ever heard of this? Anyone seen the TV show from years back, Lie to Me? Do you remember that? Yeah, he knows what I'm talking about. So there's these real smiles and fake smiles, and you're like, what do real smiles and fake smiles have to do with extroversion? If you were to guess, who smiles more real smiles, extroverts or introverts? Ooh, now we're on to something, okay? And so if I look at somebody and I can tell that they're smiling real smiles and that they normally would, what does that usually tell me? They're extroverted. Extroverted, okay? So some other people said like eye contact too. So if you were to guess, if someone kind of has their head down and they don't really look at you and their shoulders are rolled forward and they're more timid, are you going to think they're probably more inhibited and introverted or extroverted and uninhibited? You got it. So there's people that are called ambiverts. And I kind of said that word, and I said people who you kind of want as an integrator need to be kind of an ambivert so they can do the work and then they can also be friendly and interact with you, right? So there's people that may not even know that they're an ambivert, okay? So tell me your name. Wesley. And so if people were to guess, would you guess that he's more of an inhibited introvert, more an ambivert, or an uninhibited extrovert? Ambivert. He's an ambivert. You got it. How did you know? I know. Move to the head of the class. The student has become the teacher. Okay, so there now he's smiling the real smile as you see it, okay? But he's going to look before he leaps. He's going to be more cautious and not necessarily put himself out there unless he feels like it's important. But yet he has a nice smile and he can engage with people, right? So he's an in-betweener. So what does that mean? That means that he can kind of be extroverted when he needs to be, and then in his head when he needs to be. And you're like, well, isn't everybody like that? Yes, but there's some people that are really in their heads, and there's some people that are really out of their heads, okay? So when you think about looking at somebody and you go, okay, so what is this person? You look at whether or not they smile quite a bit. You look at whether or not they're more timid. You look at how they carry themselves, okay? So tell me what your name is. Up there in the middle, we chatted not very long, but beforehand he just said hello because he was here early. What's your name? Yeah. I'm Ty. Ty, what would everybody guess he is? An inhibited introvert, ambivert, or like an uninhibited extrovert? He is, but look at his body language. He's still cautious, so he's more extroverted than he is, but just look at how he's doing this thing, okay? So he's going to be more cautious. He's not just going to like jump in head first, but sometimes he likes to show off and have a good time, so he likes to do his thing. But his type has a nice smile, as you can see, but he's not so loud and brassy. So if you think about people who are uninhibited extroverts, those are people like Kevin Hart, Jim Carrey, Oprah, right? So they're loud, brassy, and smiley, okay? So we don't have very many people like that here, but Lisa, who came up earlier, she is one of those types. And so, yeah, she's, yeah, exactly. You get a new car, you get a new car. So she's an example of an uninhibited extrovert. So what does that mean? Would she have a lot of energy, medium amount of energy, or not very much energy? A lot of energy. Now, do you have a lot of energy usually? Yeah. And do you not run companies and run a family and do all these things? Yeah. So she's more action-oriented. So people who are like in-betweeners, like ambiverts, would you guess that they need to recharge their batteries a lot, a medium amount, or not very much? Medium amount. And then inhibited introverts, they need to recharge their batteries a lot. Now, everybody needs to recharge their batteries, but people who are uninhibited extroverts, they're lucky in the dopamine game. So everybody's probably heard of dopamine, and it actually makes it so your face moves more. It makes you gesticulate with your hands, and it also makes you happy. So it just so happens that people who are extrovert, especially uninhibited extroverts, they report being happier than inhibited introverts, okay? And so the reason why is that dopamine makes you feel good. It makes you also move more fluidly. So there were these studies about dopamine, and like Parkinson's disease is related to dopamine. So how do people with Parkinson's disease move? Is it more fluid or jerky? Jerky, and it's a disease related to dopamine. And so if you're feeling a little bit like you're not flowing and that you don't have that energy, chances are you don't have as much dopamine as other people. And so there's really kind of a set amount that your body says that's like your equilibrium. And if you go over that, you could get headaches. You could wear yourself out. You could feel like you're just exhausted, right? Who's ever felt that way? Raise your hand. Yeah. Okay. So in regards to the business thing, we touched upon the integrator. And we're going to talk a little bit about relationships, and then we're going to do a Q&A. Who would want to do a Q&A after this, or do you want me to just keep talking? Q&A? Got a few people. So did we put up the slide for like questions? Did we have that up? I want you to be thinking of questions, so you can scan that on your phone. And if you want to ask me something, we're going to do a Q&A, and it will go through our system, and we'll maybe pick you, and I'll answer the question. But in regards to business, if you can understand what your personality is, the personalities on your team, in your business, it can help it to run more smoothly. And if you can get the right people in the right positions, then you're not pretending. Because a lot of people, when they take personality tests, like for example, if you go to a company, they have you take the test, and you may take it in the way that you think that they want you to be. And so it really messes with companies, and they make a lot of, in my opinion, bad decisions because they're basing it upon what you think you are. So now I want to talk a little bit about self-concept versus your actual authentic self. So your self-concept is how you see yourself. Your self that is your authentic self is who you actually are. And when there's a mismatch between who you think you are and who you actually are, this is a lack of self-congruence. And I found that self-congruence leads to authentic living. It leads to fulfillment. Because what I learned for myself is that you cannot be fulfilled if you're wearing a mask. And a mask is like a persona. I call them personality masks. So for example, you know in your heart, after you've asked yourself this question, if I had $100 million, no responsibilities, and I couldn't fail, what am I really like? And you're like, you know what, I'm actually a really spontaneous person, or actually I'm not that uninhibited. I thought I was a party animal, but I'm actually not, And you really take a look at yourself. You go in the Dagobah cave and you say, who am I? Then you actually get to those all-stars and bench players. And when you understand your all-stars and bench players, you can then become a good coach. And if you're a good coach, you know when to put your all-stars in and your bench players. So if everybody watched like the NBA Finals, you know that the Warriors won, and for a couple of years they were all injured. So what happened? They played their all-stars too much. They won, but then they got injured. And so if you play them too much, and then you have long seasons and whatnot, it's easier to get injured. And so if you're only playing your all-stars, I say put in your bench players every once in a while, because you're going to cause yourself problems. And if you're like, I don't really like myself as my all-stars, I'm going to put just my bench players in. Do you think you're going to be competitive in this world? And this is the crazy thing, is that in relationships, if you put in your bench players and you meet the person that you love, they're going to think that you're someone completely different than you are. And then what's going to happen is over time, you're going to start to be yourself, and then they're like, who did I marry, right? And so the best thing I've found for like relationships is that before you marry, you have your eyes wide open by knowing your authentic self, and then after you're married, right, half shut, but you... So I help people like before they get married, and they have to come to me. I can't go to them. I've tried that, and that didn't work. They're like, well, when you know, and it's love, And I'm like, it's puppy love, and they're like, it's full grown. Anyway, so, so people, when they come to me for like relationships, and it's not that Lisa and Devin came to me for relationship stuff. I just gave it to them, so it was just, here you go. But it's one of my favorite things to talk about because personal and professional relationships are my bag. It's my thing. And one of the cool things is that before I met my wife, I was able to recognize her personality. So it was kind of weird to her, but cool for me, because when we met and we talked on the phone, I began to tell her about herself, and she was just like, those are some things that I'm just learning for myself. How did you know that? And I was like, there's this thing I do, and I have to tell you more about it, and I'm not sure if you're going to like me after I tell you what I do. And so this was back in the day when, the Twilight series was out, and she was like, so I'm dating Edward as I'm glistening in the moon, And so, so when I met my wife's parents, they were a little bit worried because they were like, who is this guy? And they were a little freaked out that I could read people. And so I talked to her dad, and he was like a little skeptical, and he brings out all these family books with his siblings and his parents, and he's like, okay, tell me about them. And I'm like, all right. So I did, and he's like, that was really good. So I sold him. It was a little hard for her mom, and it was kind of funny because she was like, I don't know what to do with him. I don't know what category to put him in. So she kept setting up my wife, even when we were engaged, to like doctors and lawyers. So I had to win them over. Anyway, so for relationships, we're just going to do something quick, and then we're going to do the Q&A. Did people get on and ask questions? Yes. Okay, good. So I'm already covering him? Okay. So I'll quickly say something about relationships, and then we'll do the Q&A. We started a little bit late, but I wanted to make sure that we hit on all the three. So with relationships, I have a dating and mating theory. I have a matchmaking theory, and it's not that people with the same type should be together, and it's not that you can't be conscientious with somebody else who's not very conscientious. Sometimes, as Rocky said, I've got gaps, and he says to Adrian, I got gaps, you got gaps, we fill each other's gaps, right? So some people have that kind of mentality, but that doesn't always work. I found that if you can be pretty similar, and this is what studies have shown, you have to be pretty similar. If you're not similar enough, it will feel like you're going to the dentist all the time and like, oh, there you go again, and why can't you just, and so people who I found that are really well matched, first of all, they have a good character, and they've learned how to not be a selfish jerk, But second of all, I think that if you match in regards to your inborn personality, it's much easier to feel like you're understood, that you feel like you can be yourself. And so there's couples that I'll talk to, and they don't even feel like they can be themselves. And I think that people should not be kept from being able to be themselves. I think a lot of people will kind of mold to the person and kind of acquiesce, but in the long run, you don't get your personality needs met. So here's something I want to share, and then we'll do the Q&A, is that you have to get your personality needs met and your lifestyle requirements met in a relationship. And you're like, okay, well, what are those? Well, you have to figure out, of course, how much significance the person needs. So there's certain types of people that have a high need for significance. And I compare them to people who are like rainforest plants. And so if you've married someone who's a rainforest plant, you have to make sure you water them a lot. And then there's other people that have a low need for significance, and they're like desert plants. And if you are like a desert plant, you don't need to water them as much. And if you're a rainforest plant married to a desert plant, sometimes you can overwater them and think, oh, you need this water. And you're like, I'm a cactus. I'm prickly in parts, yeah. So, so they just don't need as much. And so significance, that's one thing to be aware of. Another thing is certainty. So a lot of people who are really inhibited and very shy and don't want to do the wrong thing. They need more certainty. So when you speak, you can't say things like, yeah, I don't know what I want to do, or yeah, we'll kind of figure it out, or we're just going to play it by ear. They go, I needed to kind of know. So like my wife, she needs a little bit more significance. So if I say, yeah, we're just going to go to Europe and kind of wing it, she's like, no, I need to know where the hotels are, and I want to make sure we're safe. And I'm like, I know, just messing with you. So if you're that type of person, you need more certainty. And there's other people that don't need much certainty. So if you're a person with a lot of certainty, and then you marry someone who doesn't have very much, they often need to be filled. And the people that already feel like they're certain, you don't need to worry about it. And so that's another one. Another one is like spice of life. Some people need a high amount of spice of life. So they don't always have to be like doing things, but it's like, it could be intellectual, spiritual, emotional. They just need some variety. There's some people, they do the same thing. They go to the same restaurants, wear similar clothes. That's low spice of life, right? But people who change their hair all the time, and people who change their clothes, they go traveling, they go different places, they try on different stuff, those are high need for the spice of life. So we have actually in this side of the room quite a few high spice of life. They need more. Yeah, there you go. You know what I'm talking about. She's like, I changed everything. And so, are you dating or married?
Dating.
Okay, dating.
Failed at the other.
Failed at the other marriage, no worries. Okay. So yeah, so one of the things that you'll like look for is someone who will want to, want to have the spice of life with you, because you're changing things up all the time, and you're that type of person like, what is she doing? Where's she going? What's going on? Because your life has to be magical and fantastical, and if it's not, you're like, what's it all for, right? And
Wait,
so
you're saying I need a partner that has spice too?
who needs spice too, but they don't have to have so much, but you'll feel like, you're like, this is no fun, you know? But, you know,
I'm dating.
okay, I'm assuming he is or not? Not so much spice. So,
He's the nicest guy ever.
okay, so
What about that guy?
which guy? That's funny.
He's my financial guy, and he was my next door neighbor.
Oh, was he? Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah.
Girl next door.
Yeah.
That was
Okay. So here's the thing. People with your personality, they actually have high expectations for their mate, their life, and everything. Okay? They can. But I'm just saying, because like, you're like, you want it all. And the crazy thing is that, isn't Thor taken, right? Saying it to her because we were talking about Thor. You know, Chris Hemsworth. Do you want Chris Hemsworth? No. Oh, surprising. Anyway. Yeah, so we can talk sometime. Okay. So another one is like this deep connection. So a lot of people, of course, need the deep connection, but that is to do with your authentic self. That's the only way, and you have to get vulnerable. So whoever's read like Brene Brown, yeah, got to get vulnerable. And so the vulnerability is what's necessary. So you have to be able to get vulnerable with the person, which means that you are able to not put up your guard, not put on your mask. Because this is the thing, is that most people, they have a mask. And if you base your relationship or you liking the person on their mask, they probably haven't put on a mask because you're like, I already know he's a cactus. Anyway, so you have to take the mask off with the person that you're talking to, and if it connects with the masks off, then it's legit. And so if you're able to meet those personality needs, then there's a greater chance that you're going to be able to mesh. And so choosing a mate or even being with a mate, you have to have those experiences. So some people who've been married 10, 20, 30 years, they have never taken off their masks fully. And you'd be like, how's that even possible? I was going to say something, but maybe I won't. But the amount of women that have gotten O is very low to what you would expect. And to be able to have that, you have to both be vulnerable in your authentic selves. Okay, I'll say that because I know there's some kids here. And I know there are going to be kids here. Anyway, So my point is that people who are able to do that, they're able to be vulnerable, and the person is vulnerable with them. That's how it works. All right, so we're going to do a Q&A, and we have some questions that Brad has probably for me.
Let's start with a round of applause. You can see now why it's a highly addictive coach relationship, right? So there's a lot of great questions. I don't even know where to start. We've got 32 of them. Yeah, so there was one interesting one. We thought you focused on a lot of the positive traits. Do you have the same ability to kind of see and diagnose the negative sides of that as well? And how come you didn't focus on those?
Oh, I'm a crowd pleaser right now, put on a show, got to do the magic, pull the rabbit out of the hat. Most people don't want to have their dirty laundry aired in front of everybody. Yeah. And so when I do real sessions, just one-on-one, I can tell them the critical aspects, because there's certain people that if they're shamed in front of people, I mean, it's one of the most difficult things that people deal with. And so if I'm vulnerable with someone, they're vulnerable with me, and then I just hang them out to dry, that's violating the relationship,
Yeah, and I think there's some people, it needs to kind of come in almost bite-sized chunks, right? Because another great question is, who are the types that are most likely to mistype themselves, and what, yeah.
Okay, so the people that are going to mistype themselves the most are the most highly contextual. So if you go through a personality test and you say, it depends, you're going to mess up the test. And he's like, I know, I get the wrong type every time. And so if you get the different type every time you take the MBTI or StrengthsFinder or DISC, then chances are you're one of those people. So if you remember in the beginning, I talked about highly contextual people, and it's not bad. It's not like a scourge or a curse that you have it. It just means that you think in terms of specifics. So you have to say something to that type of person that is very familiar. So for example, instead of just talking about something in general, you have to talk about the thing that they know. So I found that to help them to realize who they are, I ask them those questions. I say, okay, so if you had $100 million and you don't have any responsibilities, no kids, no dog, no husband that you have to take care of, and then you wouldn't fail, what are you going to be like? And they're like, sometimes they say, I don't even know. And so they have to really sit with it and think, well, what do I do? So a lot of people, when they really have this unlimited time and resource and no responsibilities and ton of freedom, they start to go, well, actually, I would relax and do nothing, And that usually is a sign that you're burned out and overworking. Okay, so that won't tell you who you are. That's burnout. Okay, and burnout is a mismatch between your unconscious desires and the requirements of your job and your life. Okay.
One of my favorite questions is why purple shoelaces? So that was a question for me, which is funny because I think when you talk about your bench players, I tend to I tend to play small a lot, and so this is my little dynamic of expression, I suppose, but just got to keep it different. So interesting question is, how early can you type people, and how young do they, is there a certain age where it really becomes more effective?
Yes, so I'm going to tell you something, but I don't want people to send me ultrasounds, but I've been able to type my children from ultrasounds. And so I have 4 kids, and I was able to type all 4 from ultrasounds. Now, don't send me ultrasounds, because I think it's partly spiritual, partly my ability, because it's not easy. And it's funny, because I don't know if anyone's ever seen a baby in utero with an MRI. It's pretty scary. Google it. The reason why they don't use MRIs is because of what you'll find. So are you Googling it right now? He's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. so like the ultrasound, it's like, oh, it actually looks like a baby, sort of, and it's like the side of their head, and so you can see different things with their facial structure, the way it's all set up, and you'd be like, well, how did you do that? Not even be able to look in their eyes. Well, I've gotten so good that there's an essence. So there's like bird watchers that they can look at a bird 200 yards away, and they can be like, oh, that's a type of finch, and they call it a giss. And so you're able to know by the way that they move and just like their plumage and like their structure what they are. That's the same thing. So everybody's like, what am I?
There's a number of questions that are to you. Like, is this overwhelming? Is this exhausting for you? How does this affect you? And being able to have this ability to see people like that.
I can turn it off and on, so everybody thinks that I'm on all the time, but I'm not. And so it is only exhausting when I'm around people that are takers. So everybody knows the takers, some of the givers. She's a giver right there. She's like, I know all the takers. They're always taking advantage of me. I give and give and give, right? You're one of those people that will do everything for everybody. And so the takers find you, and they're like feeding off you. It's like a host relationship, and you're like, this is what, certain religious figures would do, and so you'll do it,
Let's talk for just a second about like the idea that, because there's a lot of people that are asking questions about like, I feel like my personality's changed in the last few years, or what if I don't love my personality, and so maybe just a little bit about maybe self-actualization, some of how that relates to their types.
Yeah, so there are some people that are really upset when they find out what they are, and they're like, I was actually trying to get rid of those personality traits because nobody likes them. So there are some people, like for example, females that are highly conscientious, they're often treated differently than ones that are not as conscientious. So a conscientious female will be more blunt, to the point. They're always in that mode of organizing and making sure everything is just so. And so some people will say, I don't like that you're doing that. So like if they're on vacation, everything is scheduled out, and then they schedule like an hour for free time so that you can have a good time. And so it's like, we're going to be calculatedly spontaneous together. And so she's like, I know what that's all about. Yeah. And so that's not bad, but it's like some people who are more free, like a free bird. There's a number of free birds here. They're like, that is stifling. So you may have had parents, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and so you want to be able to be you. And so tell me your name again. Rod. His type is actually one of the types that needs the most freedom. It's just this huge freedom and liberty lover. It's like, do not chain me and just tie me down, man. And so there's that side to people. And so like with females, if they're more highly conscientious, they come off as more masculine or abrasive. And so some men don't know how to handle that, and they don't know how to deal with it. And then sometimes women who are that way, they start talking to women, and women start saying that they're too blunt and too sharp, and like, why are you saying it like that? And then they kind of avoid them. And so they start saying, I don't like that about myself. And so what I found is that when you're able to get to that point of acceptance, ultimately it's like you have all these parts of the vehicle strewn about. Like if you're at your house and there's just the parts strewn about. When you pull them all together and you figure out, oh, these are the parts that I have, it turns into a vehicle, and then you can actually get somewhere. So if you start thinking, I don't really like what I am, well, you may not have to use your traits like Edward Scissorhands, where he's cutting himself or whatever. You could actually learn how to trim some bushes and do something with it that's different rather than hurting people, right? So you're like, I know Edward Scissorhands, and then some other people are like, I've never heard of Edward Scissorhands.
Let's talk just for a second. What are some of the ways that you work with teams? There's a lot of questions about like, can you help me, figure out who I should date? And we've covered that. What are some of the ways that you work with teams and organizations? And what are some of the things you notice in teams that are really tied to personality?
Yeah, so for businesses, I kind of touched upon, I try to get the right people in the right spots. So they have me come in and work with their interview process, and they help me to see what they're kind of looking for, and then I help them to look for that person. And so recently I found a ton of integrators for businesses because that was kind of the thing. And then when you start getting known for that one thing, then everybody starts talking about it. And so that's why I kind of brought it up. But I was surprised there are only like 2 people that are looking for an integrator. And maybe people don't know what an integrator is, but if you're the type of personality that just doesn't love to do the same thing over and over again, and you need someone to kind of take the reins, that's the type of person. So in companies, what I'll do is I'll do events where I type their team and help them to do communication workshops. And so in my approach, there are types that are waves and points. So waves are going to let things play out. They're going to focus more on the journey. Points are going to be more structured and want to be straightforward, and then they're going to care more about the destination. So one of the problems in companies is you have waves and points working together, and they don't know how to speak to each other. So I was talking earlier to Lisa and Devin, and I kind of explained that like point types, it's like they're speaking German. And so they'll say things like, Ich liebe dich, and in German that means I love you, but it sounds like I hate you. And so, then you've got more wavy types that are kind of like here and there and everywhere, and they have more diphthongs. They're like, oh, and maybe we'll do this, and go here and there and there. And so that's just more sing-songy, and it's more flow, right? And so they want to be around people that are more flowy, but then if they have to like work together with like point types, then there's a personality clash. So almost always, the points and the waves will have a clash unless they learn how to get along. So if you have team members or you have a business and you've got waves and points, don't go like based off like the personality tests. You have to really get to the essence of what you think that they would be, and that's why I kind of gave you some of the physical characteristics that you're looking for. And so if somebody looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime, do you think that he is going to be more point or wave? Point. So like think about his movies. Get to the chopper, you know.
It's not the Duma.
It's not the Duma. Stick around, you know. So it's like, is he getting to the point? Right. Now he's acting, but sort of. So not all points are like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, former governor. But there's other people that they'll say, yeah, I kind of maybe sort of want to do that. Would you guess is that's more wavy or pointy? And is there something wrong with that? No. But if you want to streak, she's like, yes, it's terrible. Just get to the point, right? And then the wave goes, get to the wave. Yeah, so people really need to understand that one dynamic especially. So for companies, if you were to guess, would you guess that waves or points like to troubleshoot more? Waves actually do. And so some of the best IT people are waves, but they're like objective waves. So they're like, let me figure out how to do this. Let's hack into this. Let's get on 4chan. Let's be a part of Anonymous. And so they often become hackers because they want to figure out how to troubleshoot, right? Whereas a lot of points, it's like, just tell me what you need me to do and I'll do it. Or if they're more of a deep point where they're more intuitive, what they want to do is like fine-tune things and figure things out, because there's people that are going to be more linear thinking points, and then there's like the really deep thinking points. And so the point types are often going to be the ones that want to finish things. So they have a brain that says the input must equal the output. So on average, you're going to want an accountant that's usually more of a wave or a point. Usually a point. Now there's a lot of waves that are like, I'm a point. And they get that job, but their brain is like, I don't like doing this, but it pays the bills. And it's just like, have you ever heard of a starving accountant? Probably not. But you've heard of starving artists. So they're like, I once wanted to be an artist, but then I got real. And now I'm an accountant. And I don't starve anymore. So.
Well, we're a bit over time. So I want to just maybe stand up and just throw this slide up here in a second. There we go. This QR code is different than the last one. And if you click on this QR code, this will be an opportunity to connect. And so it's going to prompt you to send a message. It's going to say connect, and just go ahead. It will actually populate the number for you, and then it will automatically just send it in our system. And then we'll reach out to you, and we'll come up with a few different ways that you can connect. And I've gotten a number of text messages of people that have questions and ways that they want to ask questions and get involved. And I just kind of want to close with this thought. And maybe stand up with me for a second, because I think that, as I started with, I don't think that there's a more productive investment you can make in your life, in your journey, to understand who you are, how you're built, and how to fully tap into your potential. I don't think there's a better investment to make, and I know for certain that there's not a better person to talk to give you that guidance to figure that out beyond what you might see, especially if you feel like you are stuck or you're perhaps just a little bit skewed or blinded by the experiences that you've had, the ways that some of those voices show up for you. So first of all, I just want to give you a round of applause and thank you for the time you've spent with us. So. And leave you with an invitation. One of my favorite questions to end with is, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do? And I love that question. I love, it forces you to ask these kinds of questions. What was I built to do? What would I do if I had, just like you talked about, if you won the lottery, what would you do? And what would that pull you to do? And then the question is, what has stopped you? What is that next thought in your mind that says why you might not do it or why you shouldn't do it? And I think when we're willing to break through and really ask that question and then follow through with what could that be, what could that mean, and just as someone that's experienced that, to tell you that when you do that and when you break through, even if it feels like it's not working out very well, that authenticity, that passion, that realness of what you do and what you love doing creates so much more momentum and so much more power that you cannot recreate by being out of alignment with who you are. So as a business owner, as a family, Alex has done amazing things to help me understand my 4 kids, and amazing things to help me understand Josh, who's my partner up there. It's funny because he actually came into my business as an integrator, and he's a wave. So he's really not, in his perfect sense, not really that integrator, although he knows how to be an amazing integrator. But as the business continues to expand, there's going to be a better path for him. So we're always battling this and we're always fighting this, but knowing it and being able to see it and then align our teams and our people and our families and our relationships around it is just powerful. So thank each of you for being here. I'm so grateful for your investment, and I hope that you've seen something, gained something, or just perhaps sparked something that makes you curious enough to say, what's that next level for me? What's growth for me? And if that's the case, then our mission was successful. And again, thank you, and thank everybody for coming.